Very warm welcome to the first in World Green Building Council's monthly COP30 webinar series called Be Bold on Buildings. It's great that you could join us today. My name is Stephen Richardson and I am the Senior Impact Director at WorldGBC. Just over a week from today, next Wednesday in fact, we will have passed the midpoint of this half century. That means we'll be closer to 2050 than to the year 2000. We have just over 1,600 days left until we hit 2030, and in fact less than 140 days until COP30 opens its doors in Belém in Brazil in November. So we are gathering here today at a critical juncture. And those following COP developments will know that Brazil's presidency has set forth a bold new framing in the last days, anchored in the concept of a globally determined contribution, a GDC. If you haven't yet read the COP president's fourth letter, I really encourage you to do so. At the heart of this vision is a reframing of the global stocktake, not just as a technical process, but as a strategic compass guiding our collective ambition and alignment to deliver on the Paris Agreement. Right around the globe, our network of more than 75 national green building councils, who together connect some 48,000 organizations, is already delivering solutions for a sustainable built environment in the real economy. And they are demonstrating how the built environment is not just a sector to be transformed, it's a solution that can close the implementation gap spotlighted in the global stocktake. Over this series of monthly webinars, you'll be hearing from change makers who are scaling tangible action to ensure that we're implementing key aspects of that global stocktake, namely tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency, phasing out fossil fuels. All of these are areas with huge potential for our sector to deliver, and we know from our work that these are not just future aspirations. These stories are unfolding in cities, on construction sites, in design studios, and in boardrooms around the world. Through this series, we hope that you will come away with a deeper understanding of practical, high-impact solutions that exist in the built environment, of the work that our global network is doing to implement solutions in the real economy, and an invitation to join our Be Bold on Buildings advocacy campaign. In today's session, we are launching the NDCs scorecard. It's a practical, easy to use online tool that will allow policymakers, green building councils, and other key stakeholders to assess their country's nationally determined contribution, or NDC, their climate action plan against international best practice for sustainable built environment policies. And I had the chance just in the last week to road test the tool before it was launched. I was really impressed by how the team have managed to make it both really comprehensive, but also super intuitive to use. My colleague Alice Bond, who's been part of the development team, will be explaining shortly how the scorecard helps reveal gaps in NDCs and national policy and identify targeted priority actions which are needed to increase ambition and effectiveness. And following her, we will then have a panel discussion where we'll be hearing from government officials, Green Building Council implementers, as well as industry represented by the Women Business Coalition to discuss what does a strong outcome for the built environment at COP30 look like, and what role do NDCs play in that process. But before we get to all that, I am really delighted to introduce and hand over to our keynote speaker, Antonio da Costa. Mr. da Costa has a distinguished career in Brazil's diplomatic service. He has served as ambassador for Brazil in numerous international postings, and he currently holds the position of Chief International Advisor at the Office of the Ministry of Cities. And in this role, he has become a key figure connecting the Brazilian COP presidency to the built environment community, supporting the Intergovernmental Council on Buildings and Climate, which Brazil co-chairs. Mr. da Costa, we are delighted to have you with us today. It's a pleasure to be able to welcome you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I am the one who is delighted to participate in the seminar. I'm grateful for the invitation. As I was thinking about how to pursue this keynote speech, I was actually going to first and foremost call the attention of all of you participants to the fourth letter. I think it not only frames the idea of a global voluntary contribution, which I think is important, it also frames the GST into 6 main axes, if you will. One of them particularly relevant for us, which is the one that's on the fourth on the list, which is building resilience for cities, infrastructure, and water. And that would be the one that I would hope to address to you in the couple of minutes that I have to share my thoughts. It has been our plan since COP28 in Dubai to pursue an agenda which would put in the forefront of climate discussions both cities and urban infrastructures, which include obviously the built environment. And in doing so, what we pursued was adopting a number of voluntary commitments, including the CHAMP coalition, in order to work with a multi-level approach, which we have pursued also internally, and then joining the Shio Declaration and the International Council on Buildings and Climate in order to push forward strongly and with a sense of purpose the decarbonization of the built environment. How do we see this? We see this from a very peculiar and I would say developing country perspective. We are aware that there's a significant deficit of infrastructure and basic services, both in Brazil and globally, particularly in the global south. We estimate, or it is estimated, that until 2030, we will have to invest between 4 and 6 trillion US dollars per year in order to respond to that demand for infrastructure and basic services. And that does not include, those projections do not include preparing this investment, this infrastructure for the impacts of the climate change and climate crisis. So the main decision that we believe needs to be taken is what type of infrastructure we want to invest in. And we are convinced that we need to move forward from the gray traditional infrastructure of sanitation, mobility, urban infrastructure, and buildings towards infrastructures that are greener and more sustainable. Both sanitation and mobility are essential services for our citizens, and therefore they themselves are already critical in order to tackle poverty and to tackle inequality and vulnerability, particularly in informal settlements in our cities. But on the other hand, obviously we are fully aware that those investments can also contribute to worsen the climate indicators by increasing heat areas, reducing green areas, and so forth. So we were hoping to use COP30 and in a similar message, on an aligned message, which what the president has done in order to call global partners to work together in a new paradigm for urban infrastructure. We would like to promote a greener, bluer infrastructure using low carbon technologies and nature-based solutions as the main elements of this rethinking. And they should not become just innovations per se, but I think they need to be integrated, fully integrated in public policies, in the offers that the market makes, and also in the engineering and construction practices nationally and globally. So for us, from the perspective of Brazil, COP30 and this discussion and all the mobilization around the built environment is an opportunity for us to strengthen a conversation in that sense. And it's not just a technical question, although it certainly is one, but we also need to involve local communities because they have a significant role to play in the implementation and operation of green infrastructures. We are particularly, if you want, aware and keen to involve our informal settlements in our urban cities. Those of you who know Brazil are fully aware of the impact of these informal settlements and the fragility of these informal settlements. So we have also been pushing for an agenda of discussion regarding, for instance, all the issues related to resilient cities, to look into those more vulnerable populations that live in our informal settlements. And that actually are a picture of inequality that we need to address. Inequality and vulnerability walk together. They are twin critical problems that we need to confront. And we do believe that in investing in greener infrastructure and greener buildings as a whole of a national policy would also have an effect in us applying and understanding how to use these new low carbon greener solutions also to address the issues of our informal settlements. So in our perception, we need to first and foremost establish new standards and norms of in terms of building and construction and engineering. I think the second is obviously cooperation with the private sector in order to increase the market offer of more resilient, greener, sustainable buildings. I think the third would be certainly direct investments for subnational governments that are committed to this new view, this new paradigm of how we should look at infrastructure. And fourth, and this is very important in line of what we're trying to do in this COP30, showcase concrete examples that can be replicated and globally that are good practices in terms of how we deal with this new agenda of a more sustainable, greener, low carbon infrastructure. We are already trying to have in Brazil some of those practices adopted. There are a number of programs that we have been pursuing in that regard. We have a nature-based solution for informal settlements, which is a policy that we have just put forward together with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Cities for our informal settlements, our peripheries, as we call it. We have also revised the investment program of the government, which is called the Program of Growth, and in order to integrate greener infrastructure and nature-based solutions in those projects that we are already developing. And we have also launched recently also the Green and Resilient Cities program that has a component specifically addressing nature-based solutions. And we are hoping also to integrate a program regarding low carbon buildings in that project. And finally, a number of pilot projects that we have in preparation by the Ministry of Cities in a number of cities in Brazil, including Nova Friburgo, Santo André, Palmas, Fortaleza, Diadema, and even the capital, Brasilia. So we are trying to work towards that agenda. And we really wish that different initiatives regarding our global ABC coalition and the built environment will align themselves in order for us to have a more robust and result-oriented discussion in COP that integrates fully this agenda in their different dimensions of the climate discussions and the climate negotiations. I hope I don't think I have gone over the time that I was allotted, and I'm certainly open to answer questions. But yes, just to conclude, we are really committed to this agenda, and we really hope to commit all partners together with us towards Belém. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words, Ambassador da Costa. Yes, the commitment is clear. I was struck by your analogy of inequality and vulnerability walking together like twins. Powerful words. Thank you for that reminder. We will now move into a presentation of the new tool that WorldGBC's just launched today, the NDC scorecard, where I hope you'll recognize some of the themes that Ambassador da Costa has been highlighting for us around the need to link policy and practice, the need to address vulnerability and resiliency in cities, and the need to scale and replicate best practices. I think all of that comes through in the tool. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce and hand over to Alice Bond, who's part of the advocacy team at WorldGBC that's been developing the tool. Alice, over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks so much, Antonio, as well, for your great keynote speech. I've got a section now on NDCs and NDCs as a mechanism for change. But firstly, to touch on what are nationally determined contributions and why are they so important. So as Stephen mentioned at the beginning, they are climate action plans, and they're submitted by every country who's signed up to the Paris Agreement. And they set out how that country is going to decarbonise. So what is that strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to reach the collective goal of reducing temperatures to 1.5 degrees, as well as to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And what's really important about this particular document is that it works across multiple sectors. So it's not just focused on one specific topic. But the current set of NDCs that are submitted are really not on track. This is a really big year for NDCs in 2025 because the next update of NDCs are being submitted. And February was the initial deadline for those submissions, but we believe due to the very low level of submissions, the deadline has been pushed back to September this year. And you can see on the screen here as a print screen I took from Climate Watch data last night, and it shows the live tracking of where countries have submitted their NDCs. So the countries in blue have currently submitted. So that's 23 of the total number of 174 countries have submitted so far. So there's still a huge way to go in the coming months in terms of updates and submissions. And eyes will really be on these NDCs at COP30 in Brazil this year, as we're kind of highlighting the various policy updates that have been made. But the NDC updates at the moment, they're really not on track, but we see NDCs as a huge opportunity to unlock the potential of buildings to make a big impact through the construction sector. And so the current commitments within those NDCs are on track for about 2.5, 2.9. Some people have even suggested 3.1 degrees of warming. So, you know, there's a significant shortfall here in terms of what we're really hoping and the level of ambition we're really looking for. And we've done quite a lot of background research into NDCs, into buildings, what's included and what's currently excluded. And whilst the majority of NDCs do include buildings, 81%, only a very small percentage actually include specific targets or funding strategies. And we also noticed that whilst most NDCs, you know, do cover buildings, they might only cover one specific aspect of buildings. So the coverage really isn't comprehensive as we would like to see. But what we really see as NDCs as offering is an opportunity for countries to attract investment, to bridge those finance gaps, and importantly, to scale climate action to meet those global climate targets. So we saw this as an opportunity to gain momentum in terms of policy and advocacy ahead of COP30 and also after COP30, working with governments, working with green building councils, working with different stakeholders globally to strengthen the NDCs and national policies. So over the last few months, we have been working on what we're calling the NDC scorecard for sustainable buildings. So we have worked initially with 5 pilot green building councils. So that's Brazil, Colombia, Egypt, Nigeria, and the Philippines, to create a tool which provides a gap analysis between what are the best practice sustainable built environment policy measures and what's actually included in the specific text of both the NDCs, but also the national policies and regulations. So the tool provides a gap analysis between those two areas and importantly identifies areas and policies that governments should be focusing on to make their NDCs and their national policies more effective. And throughout the whole process, we've engaged with local stakeholders, international stakeholders through hosting in-country workshops, regional workshops, and through a large global consultation as well. So we haven't taken thoughts and policies just from one country. We really have taken a global approach to develop the tool that we have created here. And so today we are launching the tool. There is on the screen a QR code which takes you straight to the registration portal, but there's also a link in the chat which I saw Emily shared earlier. And I am just going to share my screen, share my separate screen, which I can then walk you through a live demo of the tool. So once you log in, so you will go to the registration page, which you can see through the link. You will then type in which country you're representing. You might be an official country representative if you're a green building council or government. If you don't represent a specific country, you can select, not an official country, and you can access the full tool capabilities and options. And when you log in, you'll get through to this screen here. So there's a bit of an explanation of how the tool works. We've also created this map, and the darker shades are all of the countries which have currently registered for a specific country level scorecard. So you can see there's a good geographical spread at the moment, but we're hoping over the coming months to have many more countries engaged from across the different regions. So you'll then click through to edit, which will be your 2025 scorecard. And we've split the different categories across. First, an enabling environment. So this is a section which is what are those government level areas which are necessary to create a good background to implementing different policy measures. And you'll go through the different categories and the different measures, and you can select whether these are included, whether they're in progress or they're not currently included. And you can also have, there's space to write free text around what are the next actions or maybe any links to anything which you have included. The next subsequent categories are all technical areas. So you can either navigate across the tabs at the top, or you can navigate through the button at the bottom. And these walk you through different technical sections. So we have split these down into essentially a hierarchy system. So from the top, these are the most important policies which we recommend implementing first, and all the way down to the bottom. We have, through the process of development, we had over 200 different policy measures suggested, which we have refined down to what you see here on the screen. So we feel that all of the policies here are, it provides a comprehensive overview, but it's not too overwhelming. So we feel this is a really succinct version of what are the practical policy measures that are needed to be implemented. And similarly to the enabling environment with the technical sections, you can then look at the different policy measures and select whether these are included, excluded, or in progress across either just the NDC, or you can also fill out the tool for the national policies and regulations as well. We've also put in some handy, more information, extra boxes, which just provide either a link or a case study or an example to help set the scene of what this policy might look like practically. So once you have navigated across the different tabs, it's a very similar setup for each of the different tabs. But once you get to the end, just make sure you save progress before you continue, so your work is not lost. We have then set up a summary overview page. So this just provides an overview of all of the different areas you filled out just on one page. So it's super clear and easy to understand where you have got policies included, where there's work in progress and where there is still more work to be started. And you can submit, you can then submit your work, and then you can click on this button to find out the next steps. So this is a piece of guidance we put together which points you in the direction of, if you might have, for example, 20 policies you are yet to include in your NDC, how do you start to prioritise which area you should start looking at first? So there's a little bit of guidance in here around how do you start that focus area based on impact? Where do you start? How do you start thinking about that prioritisation? So hopefully that's helpful guidance to point you towards some refined next steps in terms of policy advocacy. But let me just switch back to my slides now. So that's a very brief kind of high-level overview of the tool. Please do log in and register. We would be delighted to see lots more countries get involved and engaged. But if you would like to get engaged, these are the 3 steps that we recommend to take action on your NDC. So firstly, simply look up your NDC and policies and understand whether buildings are included. Sometimes NDCs are really huge, thick documents, but actually most of the time they're a bit more succinct, they're shorter pieces of text. But we found doing simple searches, Control-F searches within the text to identify key building terminologies is a super helpful way of navigating those. Then log into and register to our tool and then complete the tool so you can understand those gaps between the best practice sustainable built environment policy measures and what's currently included in your text. And then use our next step guide to create a super focused list of next steps, which you can use specifically for policy advocacy. So those are the 3 steps we recommend. We do have a slot for questions at the end. But I'm soon going to share and move on to our panel discussion now. So in this panel, we're going to hear practical examples and insights from government, GBC implementers in Brazil and the United Arab Emirates, and hear the role the industry plays as well. So in this panel, we will be discussing what does a strong outcome for the built environment look like at COP30, and what role do NDCs play in this? But I'm delighted to introduce now our expert panel of speakers. So please do put your camera and mics on. So firstly, reintroducing Antonio da Costa, who you've heard from already today, who is Chief International Advisor from the Office of Minister of Cities in Brazil. We're also delighted to be joined by Abir Sajwani, who is the Section Head, Policies and Environment from the Department of Municipalities and Transport in Abu Dhabi. We've also got Felipe Faria, who is the CEO of GBC Brazil. And we've got Carl Vera, who's Climate Policy Director for We Mean Business Coalition. So thank you so much to our expert panel, who's representing, many different countries who are here today to go through some questions with us. So firstly, I'm going to ask a question to Antonio. So one of the COP30 presidency themes is all about a collective effort, so a global mutirao. But how do you hope these can link through with actions on cities and buildings?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, mutirão for us is a strong word. It comes from Tupi-Guarani, which used to be a language that we spoke in the early 19th century still in Brazil. And therefore we have a number of words in our vocabulary that are usually related to social action, and mutirão is one of them, certainly, for sure. I think what we are lacking, I think there is action from the government. We are participating in the Global ABC. We are trying to develop a number of projects related to green buildings, including in social housing. We're hoping to have to finalize a program on the social housing program that we call My House, My Life in Brazil, of a green social housing building in the city of Campo Grande. And we have tools already to measure carbon in construction sites, which is called sea carbon and others initiatives. What I have a feeling from the Ministry of Cities, and I don't in no way want to be unfair, is that we have multiple initiatives, but they don't seem to be aligned together. I think COP30 gives us an opportunity to work together, private sector, social organizations from civil society, and those of us in government, both in the Ministry of City, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Industry, and others, who are committed to trying to push this agenda forward. What we already have, what the Ministry of Finance calls an ecological transformation plan. We are trying to restructure the climate fund to integrate greener infrastructure. But I think what we need now is to strengthen action by government, private sector, and civil society that are involved in this, let's say, building ambition agenda. As you can imagine, our NDC that we divulged, we published before COP29 in Baku, has not a very significant component in building decarbonization. Part of the reason is that for us, what is more critical is, as you are probably aware, is the agricultural sector and forests. So those are, let's say, the most critical issues. But if we are going to transform our cities, transform our societies in a country like Brazil, who is highly urbanized and highly decentralized, I think it is critical for us to add efforts of all into one, let's say, not one single purpose, but at least a shared view of where we want to go and how we need to get there.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Antonio. And I'm now so keen to hear more from industry. So a question to you, Carl, how can the business community best support governments in developing and delivering more ambitious, actionable NDCs, maybe particularly for the built environment as well?
Thanks, Alison. Thanks to the WorldGBC for this invitation. Congratulations on the launch of the NDC scorecard. I'm Carl, and I'm here representing the We in Business Coalition. For those of you who don't know We in Business, it's a coalition of business groups that work with the leading companies around the world to drive transition to net zero in line with the 1.5-degree objective of the Paris Agreement. When it comes to business and the NDCs, what we've learned over the last few years of working with companies in the lead up to the global stocktake and immediately after that is that businesses see the NDCs as opportunities for investment, right? The NDCs are important for business because they can signal the stability and direction of travel in terms of the policy environment that companies operate. And obviously these are important because businesses value them in terms of how they can plan their investment decisions over the coming years. But to be effective, businesses are telling us that NDCs need to send the clearest possible signal in terms of the policies that they will implement. And then obviously businesses in turn are important for the NDCs and important for governments because they can drive the net zero transition, and obviously the choices of where and how they invest really matter. So in terms of coming back to your question on sort of how businesses can support, obviously we found that it's important to include business in the dialogues to develop the NDCs, right? So we really encourage businesses to engage either in their own right where they have the influence or through their trade groups in the conversations in terms of the development of the NDCs, and in doing so to talk about the opportunities and the success stories, right? Really, we're in this phase of implementation. We've heard from the Brazilian COP30 presidency that this is an era of implementation. We need to go to Brazil with a focus on understanding what is already out there, the initiatives and the technologies that we already have. And so really business has an opportunity to showcase the solutions that are already successful, showcase case studies, showcase where they have already worked with governments, with subnationals, with cities to drive investment and to drive net zero action in line with the Paris Agreement. And obviously this is particularly relevant also for the built environment, right? The importance of public-private partnerships is critical when it comes to the built environment. When it comes to the actual NDCs themselves, obviously we know that these are nationally determined contributions. In other words, they're developed by the governments and submitted to the UN. but they need to be translated into policies and measures at the national level as well. And this is something that the business community has talked to us repeatedly. They need NDCs that can signal the direction of travel, not only at the national level, but also on sector-specific objectives. So we need these NDCs to be developed and to be translated into sector-specific targets, sector-specific timelines, ones that provides the clarity and the direction of travel for businesses engaged in sectors like transport, like energy, like the built environment, to understand the opportunities for investment and how they can work with governments on this.
Thanks so much, Carl. Super interesting answer, super varied as well, and really aimed at delivery. So moving to Abu Dhabi now, and to Abir, I'm so interested to hear from your perspective in Abu Dhabi about how a local building policy is helping to achieve broader climate and resource efficiency goals, and how do these efforts kind of feed into the national reporting on NDCs as well?
Thank you for this opportunity and for the kind invite from the World Building Green Council. In general, my name is Dr. Abir Sajwani. I am a section head of policies and environment at the Department of Municipalities and Transport in Abu Dhabi. In answer to your question, looking at UAE experience with the NDCs, with regards to the sustainable built environment in specific. So, the UAE NDC looks at the building as a key sector for both mitigation through GHG emissions reduction and adaptation. It recognizes both the importance of regulation, retrofitting, and urban policy integration into achieving the national climate goals. In terms of energy efficiency, the NDC looks at enhancing energy efficiency in the building, in the built environment through updating and having more stringent green building codes. One of which is the Istidama rating system in Abu Dhabi that we have, and there are other rating systems at other Emirates as well, like a Safat rating system in Dubai. Looking at aspects of retrofitting existing buildings and increasing adoption of smart building technologies and performance monitoring. Also, integration with the demand side management alongside with connecting the building sector to the energy and demand side management strategies through reducing energy and water consumption in buildings and promoting energy efficient practices, appliances, and so forth. Also on the broader scale, how these policies align with the national net zero goals. Buildings in particular are a major sector for contribution of contributing to the emissions, and therefore improving their sustainabilities will add definitely to the UAE net zero 2050 strategy. In terms of also urban planning and climate adaptation, the NDCs specifically mentions climate resilient infrastructure and urban planning that looks at both in terms of building design, addressing heat stress and cooling demands. If I speak specifically with the Abu Dhabi experience with regards to the Istidama rating system, which acts as the green building regulation for the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, it has a really crucial role in aligning local, urban development with UAE broader climate and resource efficiency goals. This is a mandatory framework for all new buildings and communities. So it's not a voluntary scheme. It's a mandatory scheme, at least 1 pearl for all buildings and 2 pearls for government buildings, because government lead by example in here. And, Istidama mainly integrates sustainability principles into the entire life cycle of the built environment, from planning perspective all the way to the design and construction and operation. There's also aspect of performance monitoring and energy efficiency and water conservation, material use, indoor air environmental quality. The rating system looks at aspects of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, enhancing resource resource productivity itself through quantified sustainability outcomes. So there's a number of KPIs that looks at how we measure and how we control and how we report on the performance of buildings in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. These are linked with the national indicators, including local progress, to be captured on the UAE climatic reporting structure and fed into the national determined contributions reporting process that happens on the federal level. In terms of the local level that we will represent, at the DMT, we ensure that urban development regulations really supports the integration of Istidama outcomes, which is the green building regulation outcomes, into planning approvals and compliance monitoring. These local accountability and performance tracking are essential for feeding really accurate data into national frameworks and demonstrating real impact, are real on the ground. So basically, this is how a green building regulation in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi contribute to the overall NDC that is reported on the level of the national determined contribution.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. Super comprehensive, and also I know the UAE NDC is very comprehensive for buildings as well, and I know the UAE Green Building Council was also mentioned in the text, so that is a fantastic outcome for buildings. And now a question to Felipe. So I know we've been working together for quite a few months on the NDC scorecard project, but I'm so interested to hear what you've learned from developing the tool and really what opportunities you see in leveraging this resource to strengthen NDCs, not only at a country level, but at a global level as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Alice. I think the NDC scorecard project is, for me, it's like a roadmap that can give us an idea of how mature the country is regarding climate transitions in the built environment, and supported by, of course, public policies and regulations, because this is the idea of the NDC scorecard. Initially, the NDC scorecard, when we start to work on this project, it helped us to map, would say, like the state of the art in terms of policies and regulations and the built environment's contributions to the climate transitions, what we have right now in terms of legislation in Brazil. And because since you have like this picture in front of you, so it's easy to identify the gaps and opportunities of policies and regulations, and also considering like a benchmark with other national initiatives. But logically, it's like a document that needs to be updated frequently, I think at least once a year. But what caught our attention was the elevated number of policies and regulations in Brazil. So we already had a lot of policies and regulations that in a certain way is connecting buildings, built environment with climate change challenge, or climate transitions, decarbonizations, or most of them like energy efficiency, but it's decarbonization behind it, or even adaptation resilience. But sometimes we observe that there is a kind of disconnections between those different initiatives. For example, one of our first regulations about minimal energy efficiency requirements in buildings, I'm saying that because right now the Minister of Energy is working on this agenda. So they are creating the minimum energy efficiency requirement for public buildings and private buildings. But the first time that we have such initiative was in 2014. So it was done by the Minister of Planning. They elaborated it, but for some reason it was not implemented. But now with the Minister of Energy working this agenda, so what lessons from 2014 do we need to consider to avoid similar errors in terms of implementation? And the other thing is that synergy between different ministerials, different policies under discussions right now. For example, like the metrics behind the minimum energy efficiency requirements. So it needs to be aligned with the metrics behind the taxonomy. So the Minister of Economy is working the Brazilian taxonomy. So you have a very strong effort in terms of energy efficiency in buildings. And so we need to have those similar metrics, because then it will be easier for private sector to understand and to support those initiatives, to be fully engaged in those initiatives. Just to have an idea, we are talking about very ambitious targets. So the minimal requirements would be a mandatory law created by the Minister of Energy. It's for the public buildings, they will require the level A from our national energy efficiency labeling program that called Procel Edifica. The level B of Procel Edifica, just for all of you understand, it's similar to ASHRAE 90.1 2016. So which is like a standard that we use in the LEED international certification. So, but to summarize, to resume the idea of the NDC score, NDC project, is that can help us to achieve better synergy between policymakers, initiatives. So I think it's important for GBC to be engaged on it. It's easy to identify the state of art in terms of our national legislations, things that we already have, what's the gaps, what are the opportunities. And once you do that, and once you start for us, it was a very great surprise, because most of the gaps that we saw, we know that different ministries is already working on it. And the green building movement, I think behind us, we have we are not a sector that we're not representing the sector as an associations, but we have a niche. We have a niche of developers or projects that already show results, sometimes even results greater than what we are expecting with those legislations. So so when we start to have some meetings with the group of developers behind the project that we have here in Brazil right now, 70 million square meters of green projects all over the country. So and then we start to discuss the policies under discussions and the experience that we have in those projects. So it was like talking with some colleagues from different ministries. Was like it was like an audience that's very welcome to our ideas, and it's very supportive for policymakers. So I think that it's a good project for all GBCs to be part of.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Felipe. We do have about just under 15 minutes left. So if there are any questions, please do use the Q&A function. But I do have a final round of questions to our panelists. But as time is short, if you could please keep your answers to say 1 to 2 minutes, that would be much appreciated. So back to Antonio, I'm super keen to hear what outcomes for cities and buildings are you hopeful for at COP30, and what role do you see for NDCs in this?
Thank you. I think in 1 minute, what I would say is, I hope that COP30 would be, let's say, a step that we have towards climate action. So we don't lose sight that there is an after COP30 that we need to think about. So first and foremost, that the ICBC adopts what I would call a roadmap of action among member states of that coalition to move forward. I think a number of issues that Felipe just raised in terms of Brazil are some of the issues that we in the Ministry of Cities would hope to tackle by actually pushing forward this agenda of sustainable and resilient built environment, greener infrastructure. Of the issues that I think we need to look into and have in this roadmap of governmental action in partnership with civil society organizations that are involved in this discussion is clearly the issue of mobilizing investments in the private sector for this, let's say, greener infrastructure and greener buildings. And again, I think Felipe is fully right. Ensure normative and legal support from the government that is coherent and forward-oriented. Involvement in these discussions is key. The Brazilian government has a very ambitious agenda, both, as you can see, for the global action and also for mobilizing the national action. So they are complementary. So we are hoping that as we move towards COP30, that we actually change the conversation, including with the private sector, in order to have significant more action in terms of greener infrastructure and particularly buildings. What we have seen, and we have had discussions with the Ministry of Energy, actually during SB 62 right now in Bonn, we were sitting there talking about this, is that there are still certain sectors of the private sector that are resistant, have strong lobby powers. So we need to change the conversation, including in those, let's say, more conservative sectors. Part of I think the task is also making the whole public, including subnational governments, which in Brazil are critical, understand what's at stake. So we need to be clearer and more understandable, including for our governors and mayors, so they also get involved at the subnational level. In 2 minutes, that's what I would think to say.
Great, thanks so much, Antonio. And over to Carl now. So the question is, what signals or policy frameworks are businesses looking for in NDCs to confidently invest in sustainable buildings and cities? And I know earlier you kind of signaled that NDCs alone are, attract that investment, but is that enough? Does it need to trickle down into firm policies, or how do you see that? What do businesses need?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what I said earlier, but what I'll try and shed light on is some of the work we have been doing as the WE Business Coalition, as well as our coalition partner WBC's that just launched its business breakthrough barometer yesterday, and the aim of that is kind of take a bit of a temperature check on sort of the intentions of businesses in the net zero transition. And so some of the findings there was that while we're seeing a lot of geopolitical turbulence, the businesses that we've surveyed are maintaining transition investments and focusing on those markets and solutions that can deliver long-term competitiveness, right? So the message from them is clear that where we're seeing delayed action, this can have a negative impact not only on competitiveness, but the signal to policymakers is that investors and business leaders need to act decisively to design those policies that are targeted and reinforce supply chain resilience, that enable sector-specific investment and align with industrial competitive and climate goals. And in terms of the built environment, there's a whole deep dive on the built environment within this report. A lot of the focus there is to try and identify sort of some of those policy interventions that can lead to investment from business. And some of them are focused on, for example, on demand creation, so looking at the implementation of standards and building performance thresholds, public procurement on sustainable buildings, building codes, and then aspects related to standards and certification and life cycle assessment and capital cost support. So some of these are aspects where we're seeing business and governments working together. You can see really strong movements in some geographies, including in places like the UK and Australia. But obviously there are markets where this is still lacking. So we're really looking forward to understanding how these NDCs can help translate these national targets into sector-specific policies that enable the investment to flow.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that. And please do share a link to the barometer report in the chat if you haven't done already, so everyone can access that. And another question to Abir. So how is the built environment being recognised as both a challenge and an opportunity in the UAE's climate reporting and planning?
All right. Yeah, thank you. The built environment is being acknowledged in the UAE climate agenda as both, as a sector with high emissions, but and then at the same time resource demand, but also the key enabler for sustainable transformation. There is an opportunity there. So for Abu Dhabi, our urban growth pattern, infrastructure needs, climate adaptation requirement makes the built environment central to both to be seen as a challenge and a solution at the same time. For the Department of Municipalities and Transport, where I work in, we see this dual role clearly. While the sectors contribute significantly to energy and water demand, it also offers scalable opportunities through efficient design, through green construction practices, through retrofitting existing assets, integrated and land use planning, updating building code requirement tools like Istidama, green building regulations, alongside with digital permitting systems and integrated regulatory framework. And these are all helping us to, challenge ourselves and maybe, institutionalize the climate responsiveness into the urban development processes. To unlock really greater impact from tools like the ones that World Green Building Council scorecard, the one that you mentioned. We want to see more municipal execution reporting into the national ambitions. So when there is a national agenda that is there, that is guiding the policy framework and the strategy framework, these tools helping, the tools that the World Green Building Council is developing maybe help bridge the gap between the reporting that's happening on the local level all the way to the federal level, and then through the NDC reporting process. So it's just a very useful tool to streamline, the efforts and the reports more on a holistic type of approach. Aligning these tools with the planning code, performance metrics, may enhance the ability to prioritize actions, measure results, attract climate-aligned investment. Maybe what's greater, of importance is looking at how these small actions on the local scale contribute to the national level and all the way to the global framework for sustainability and local planning. And then platforms like these would help us understand the trends analysis over time, how the cities are transitioning into a sustainable type of pattern into their buildings and their planning processes.
Great, thank you so much. And a quick last question for Felipe. So what are the key areas you're focusing on for advocacy or implementation in NDCs within Brazil for buildings?
Yeah, Alice, we have several initiatives and policies that we are supporting, but I think that most of those initiatives we reported in our scorecard, so people can see on the scorecard platform. So since our time is short, I just would like to emphasize what Ambassador Antonio da Costa mentions about one of his priority, which is resilience for cities. I think this is what really makes sense for us, Green Building Council Brazil, because if we talk about decarbonizations in the built environment, in the buildings in Brazil, if we compare our results with the international average, we may even say that, we are very advanced in terms of decarbonization, including embodied carbon. But now we have this agenda of resilience. And I think this is the agenda that can create a closer relationship between the climate transitions and the ordinary people. Because right now, our people, they are suffering with they know that our homes need to be better prepared to a heat wave, to a cold wave, like an unpredictable storm period or drought period. So everything happened the same year in a very short in sometime the same year, or in 2 years you are suffering with all those kind of climate stress. So I think this agenda of resilience of city, and especially in Brazil, water, it's very important we need to look at. And sometimes in all our discussions we do not give the same importance of water that we are given to energy. In Brazil, for example, we have this feeling that we have a lot of water. Yes, we have in the north region, but the place where we have the big cities in Brazil, for example, in São Paulo, we have a situation that we have stress in terms of water service. So I think that this is a very, very important agenda, and I'm very, very happy that Ambassador Antonio is leading these discussions. And I think that it's one topic that can bring the COP discussions and can make the ordinary people to join our discussions, because they will understand this language better than decarbonization.
Oh, thank you so much, Felipe, and thank you so much to all of our panelists for their interventions as well. We just have a minute left, so I do see a couple of questions in the chat, which I will get back to after this session. But really just to wrap up and say, this is the first of our COP30 Be Bold on Buildings webinar series. So each month until COP30, we will be highlighting different thematic areas, showcasing real life examples of businesses delivering scalable green building solutions that address the global stocktakes implementation gap. So we will be covering mitigation, adaptation, finance, capacity building, and just before COP, we'll also be sharing some findings from the NDC scorecard. So please do keep an eye out on social media channels and our event webpage for those calendar invites when they are sent out, and with the registration links as well. Over the next few months as well, we will be ramping up our work on NDCs, trying to work with as many countries, green building councils, governments as possible through workshops, NDC scorecard analysis, through sharing insights and analysing the kind of global picture of NDCs in the built environment as well. But as we're at time now, I just want to say a massive thanks to everyone here for attending today, for all of our panelists for making time to join this session and prepare as well. So I'm going to close the session now, but thank you so much, everybody, for attending.